always exactly equal to profit? You're shaking your head, you're right, right? That it's not. Because in the short run, profit is total revenue minus total variable costs minus fixed costs, right? So in the short run, profits are total revenue minus total variable costs minus total fixed costs. However, producer surplus is simply total revenue minus total variable costs. So in the short run, profit and producer surplus are going to be different by the amount of total fixed costs, right? In the long run, since there are no total fixed costs, producer surplus and profits are the same thing. So if you're in the long run, I'm going to make this point again more formally, but building that intuition here is a good point. So in the long run, producer surplus and profits are the same thing, which is exactly where your intuition somewhat correctly pointed you when I started this all out. But in the short run, it's a little bit tricky. Profit and producer surplus aren't the same thing, right? They're different by the amount of fixed costs. So if we look at the market now, we again put our dollars here. We're not just interested in producer surplus for individual firms, but if we're interested in designing policies that affect everybody in the market, we want to come up with a good measure of producer surplus for everybody participating in the market. So here, now I use big Q. Here is my market supply curve. I'm going to stick with the same price, $4. Okay, so what that means is equilibrium quantity produced here is wherever the $4 price intersects the supply curve, this is going to be Q star. So producer surplus is going to be the area between price and supply over the range of production. So it's going to be this blue shaded area right here. This is total market producer surplus. And then, of course, the area under the supply curve here, this is going to be total variable cost for the market. We kind of ignore that one a lot, but just for completeness, I figured I'd put it there. All right, so pretty easy. Consumer surplus, area between demand and price over the range of consumption. Producer surplus, area between supply and price over the range of production. We'll see some crazy scenarios where consumption and production are going to be different quantities because of imports and exports and stuff like that. So the definition here, for the first time in the history of 106, I've given you a new one. Before, I always said it's the area above supply and below price, but we're going to get in some crazy settings where that's not necessarily true. So stick with the definition I'm giving you now, where consumer surplus is the area between demand and price over the range of consumption, and producer surplus is the area between price and supply over the range of production. That's the right way to think about that, and why that is important will become obvious very shortly. Okay. So here we are. The intuition I just gave you, I just want to formalize that again. I don't want anybody on the true or false question that says on the midterm 2, profit and producer surplus are always the same thing. I don't want anybody checking yes, right? I want everybody checking false for the reason that we just figured out that producer surplus is total revenue minus variable costs. Profit is revenue minus variable costs, but also minus fixed costs. So in the short run, producer surplus and profits are a different thing. In the long run, they're the same thing. All right, this is boring. We're almost done. This is about to get so exciting. I'm so happy for you. This is the first time when I took this class that economics actually appeared to be remotely fun. But I'm strange because I chose this as a profession. Okay, so what I'm ultimately interested in is not necessarily just the well-being of consumers or just the well-being of producers. I'm interested in the well-being of society. It's going to turn out that we're interested in consumer surplus and producer surplus separately too, as their individual quantities, because from a political economy point of view, who gains more from certain policies is going to enlighten us in terms of which lobbying groups support certain types of policies for interesting reasons. But welfare, and this is a word that economists use in a very specific way, right? Welfare is not necessarily what we're thinking of in terms of welfare programs or anything like that. Welfare in economic theory means one thing and one thing alone. It means the sum of consumer and producer surplus. It's the overall well-being of society in terms of what consumers take home in terms of dollars of consumer surplus and what producers take home in terms of dollars of producer surplus. The nice thing about this measure of welfare is it weights the dollars that consumers and producers take home equally, right? So a dollar to a consumer doesn't receive more or less weights than a dollar to producers. Everybody's sort of the same, everybody's dollar is the same dollar, right? That's a nice way of thinking about that. And this is where we're about to see something that has been one of the most abused findings of economic theory in the public media, is if we have a perfectly competitive market, right, if the assumptions for that market hold, producing the perfectly competitive outcome, meaning leaving the market alone, will maximize this measure of welfare. Interfering in the market in a way that makes the market produce more or less than the perfectly competitive outcome where we leave firms alone gets you lower welfare than if you just left the market alone, right? So let's do that for a second. But I want to make sure here, again, and I've said this a number of times, but I'm going to say it again, is this assumes a perfectly competitive market to begin with. Most markets are not perfectly competitive. So if you are in the lucky setting where you're operating in a perfectly competitive market, it is true, as we will see in a second, that society is made worse off as a whole by interfering in this market. We're going to worry about things called efficiency, right, which means maximizing the size of the pie. So everything I do here is going to try and make as much welfare as possible, meaning as much of the sum of consumer and producer surplus as possible. What does that completely ignore? And it's something that we do care about, or hopefully care about as society. So if you go to a kid's birthday party, and you bring the biggest cake the world has ever seen, and you give it to one kid, is that a good thing? Yeah, so who gets what slice of the pie, right? What size slice does anybody in society get? Should everybody get the same slice, right? Should one person get all of the pie and everybody else no pie at all, right? Should it be proportional to years of education? So this notion, and I want you to keep this in the back of your mind, and we'll talk about this a bit later, but right now we're obsessed with efficiency, which is maximizing the size of the pie. We're not going to worry about equity very much at all, which is, of course, the topic du jour right now, talking about income inequality and who has how much of the pie. We're not going to worry about equity concerns very much at all right now, but we will do later. And I will frankly admit that economists in general don't have a whole lot to add to that debate, even though many of my colleagues disagree with me on that. But I think you're better off in a philosophy or sociology department, for example. Okay, so let me show you that producing less than the perfectly competitive outcome doesn't maximize welfare. So welfare is higher, meaning the sum of consumer and producer surplus is higher if you produce the perfectly competitive output level. Let's do it. This is awesome. One of my favorite pictures in economics. I have many favorite pictures in economics. So market, right, big Q. Here we're going to put price. I'm going to draw a pretty simplistic supply curve. Supply looks something like this. Demand looks something like this. Okay, this is demand. So if I leave this market alone, where will they produce? they will produce at this price, this P star, and produce this output level. This is not rocket science. Okay? You knew this in Econ 1. Now it's going to get tricky. I want to figure out if I produce less than this perfectly competitive output level Q star, what happens to consumer and producer surplus? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reduce outputs to Q double star, and I'm going to let price rise to the level that consumers are willing to purchase exactly Q double star units, so price will be P double star. All right? So at P double star, consumers are willing to consume exactly Q double star units, which is less than what consumers would consume were they at this level right here. So settings where you get this are price controls, right? So if you're letting firms charge a higher price than what a market left alone would do, and the regulator enforces this, you get a scenario like this. We will talk about interesting settings like this across the board. We'll talk about rent control, price floors, imports. We'll talk about why you pay so much for textbooks. Not in this class, but many other classes. So this is really interesting. But this is a generic case. What if price were this high for some sort of reason, and this were the equilibrium quantity consumed? Now, just to be clear, right, the first question that comes up here is max. At that price, I don't get why it would be this quantity, right? Producers are going to want to produce over here, right? They're going to want to produce that much. Why isn't this Q double star? Well, if you're a producer and you're realizing price is really high, even though you want to produce that much, you know that consumers are never going to buy that much, right? You have focus groups that tell you that consumers will buy exactly this much. So how much consumers are willing to buy at that price is the binding constraint in the sense that this is what will get transacted in equilibrium at prices that high. Okay, let's do consumer and producer surplus and welfare. Let's see who wins, who loses. Get ready. In order to do that, we need a table. I'm going to draw my table right here. Consumer surplus, producer surplus, welfare. Then I'm going to look at Q star, Q double star, and then I'm going to look at the change in the two. Okay, quick stretch. This is the first real application of this. Okay, so I'm going to slice this picture up into some pizza slices, right, the relevant ones. I'm really good at this. I wasn't when I was your age, but I am now because I've taught this so many times. So I know the exact minimum number of pizza slices I need to chop this area up into. You can chop it up into as many as you want, right? Go to town. Chop this up into 100 slices and label them all in 3 different alphabets. I don't care, right? As long as you select the right ones in the end, we're all happy, right? But I'm going to try and remain parsimonious and just choose the ones I really need. So the ones I really need are this triangle right here, this rectangle right here, this, I don't know what that shape is called, and this triangle right here, and this triangle right here. So I need A, which is this, B, this rectangle, C, this thing, D, this triangle, and E, this triangle. So let's start. Consumer surplus under Q star. It's the area between demand and price, so area between demand and price over the range of consumption, which is Q star. So consumer surplus is going to be A plus B plus D. Producer surplus is going to be the area between supply and price over the range of production. So that's going to be C and E. So one thing I would ask you, if you write out pizza slices, always write them out as complete sums. So for example, if it's A, B, C, and D, don't write A dash D, because we will read that as A minus D, and that might be the wrong answer. Just always spell it out. A plus B plus C plus D. So the overall welfare here at Q star is going to be the sum of consumer surplus and producer surplus. So it's going to be not A dash E, even though that means A through E. I'm going to write it out A plus B plus C plus D plus E. Okay, so this whole big triangle right here. Now we get into this brave new world right here where price is high, quantity is low. So consumer surplus is going to be the area between demand and price over the range of consumption. Consumers now consume Q double star, so consumer surplus is just going to be A. Producer surplus is going to be the difference between supply and price over the range of production, so producer surplus is going to be B plus C. So total welfare is A plus B plus C. So welfare before was this whole triangle right here. Now it's this weird chopped off triangle. So it was A, B, C, D, and E. Now it's just A, B, and C. So society, from producing less than the socially, less than Q double star, lost D and E in welfare by producing less than what the market would have produced would we have left it alone. So this area right here, we need a threatening looking color, yellow. I have no idea. Here we go. That doesn't look nice. That's good. So this right here is lost welfare, okay? Lost welfare just doesn't sound so good. So we came up with a much more dramatic name. You ready for it? Dead weight loss. Right? So dead weight loss. Short, DWL, right? So DWL right here, that's the amount of welfare lost from not producing at Q star, P star. Question. What's the new price? This stuff is hard, and I'm glad you asked this question, right? The hard part here is not the pizza slices. The hard part is figuring out what quantity and price do consumers and producers face, right? And this is where students always get this wrong. They immediately start going to the table instead of taking a second and doing exactly what you're doing right now. So congratulations. Stepping back and wondering what's the right price and quantity, right? So here, and this will become more obvious when we do exact examples right here, but the market left alone will produce at P star dollars exactly Q star units. And now I'm telling you is, for some reason, let's say the government set a minimum price of P double star, which is higher than Q star, and now consumers only demand Q double star. So producers go home with P double star dollars per unit. Consumers pay P double star units per dollar, but they're only consuming and producing P double star units. So we go from P star, Q star to P double star, Q double star. And this is the simplest example. This will get completely crazy shortly, all right? But figuring out what the relevant price and quantity is, that's the key to getting these questions right. Okay, so here's a really, really difficult take-home problem. This is going to drive you a little bit nuts, and if you can do this in under a half hour, I will be proud of you. So what I want you to do is I want you to figure out what happens if you produce more than the perfectly competitive output level and show that welfare is also less than a P star, Q star. All right? So try it. If you can't get it, that's totally all right, but I want you to try it, and I'll do it at the beginning of next lecture and show you how that works. So I've shown you that producing less than the perfectly competitive output level doesn't maximize welfare, but producing more than it also doesn't maximize welfare. So the point that does maximize welfare is P star Q star. So that's a little homework. It'll be hard, but you can do it. Okay. So let's get to the pundit part of this class. Of course, all markets are perfectly competitive, hence the government should never interfere in markets, right? How many times have we heard this on various websites and on the internet and on certain TV stations too? Sure. Right? If you decided you had it with Max's bad sense of humor and fashion, and you left the class after this lecture, this is of course what you'd walk away with, right? And you would ignore some really important insights in economics. But for now, let's stick with this. Let's stick with a perfectly competitive market. Like, let's assume we have a unicorn. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at a few examples. I'm going to look at things in ways that firms actually. Come on, Max. I'm going to look at a couple of examples of government regulations where governments interfere in markets, and they do this all the time, right? Assuming that the market is perfectly competitive. So I'm going to limit the number of firms. So one example here is taxi cab medallions. I know by the time you have kids, taxis will be a thing of the past. We'll all be in flying Ubers and Lexus or whatever those things are called. But I still take cabs, right? And taxi cab markets are regulated, so you have to have a medallion in order to actually be able to allow to drive a cab. So it's an example of limiting the number of firms. Taxing a perfectly competitive market, I will show you, also reduces welfare. And I'm also going to show you some examples of international trade policies and how they interfere with welfare in domestic markets. So look at things like quotas, import tariffs, and things like that. So this will be fun. So this is now the applications part, where we take the tools that we've learned and we actually apply them to real problems. Okay, this is a tough one, but a really fun one. So what I want to think about here is I want to think about what happens if you have a city and you need some sort of transportation for hire, right? Public transportation systems are incredibly valuable. They move a tremendous number of people, and they actually take a lot of congestion off the road at peak times. There's a great paper by Michael Anderson in my department on that, looking at LA's subway. Who here knew that LA had a subway? Okay, welcome Californians. But LA does have a subway, and you can show that it takes a tremendous amount of traffic off the road at peak times. But still, taxis are everywhere, right? If I go to a city somewhere, I don't like to drive around in my zip car. I like somebody to take me places. So one thing that a lot of cities do is they require permits. So if you want to operate a taxi cab, you have to have a permit or a medallion. There are lots of other markets where you need a permit to operate. If you would like to sell hard liquor in San Francisco, you need a liquor license, right? Liquor license costs how much? Tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars at this point, probably, right? They're not cheap because they're limited and their value is very high. Because people go out on Friday nights and spend $29 on a kale martini, right? So I actually went out with somebody and they made me drink a $19 kale martini, which was the single most disgusting beverage I've ever had in my life. I hate kale. All right. Actually, the reason I hate kale is because of that evening. But, so let's stop babbling and let's show what are the welfare consequences of actually limiting the number of firms in a market and who wins and who loses, right? So let's look at that. So the firm here is a cab, all right? So we have an individual firm. I'm going to draw its cost curve right here. So little q, dollars. I want minimum average variable cost to come in somewhere here. So this is average variable cost. And then I want marginal cost to come in somewhere here. Nice job, Max. If we're in the long run, there's free entry and exit, and there's an unlimited number of potential entrants, and costs are constant. What does the long-run supply curve look like in that particular setting? Free entry and exit, identical firms, constant costs. That just means as soon as one cab raises its price, a new cab enters and starts providing cab rides at minimum average variable cost. So we know that the long-run supply curve in a free entry world looks something like this. Right, this is the unregulated outcome where each individual firm just offers Q1 rides, right, at this price P here. And the long-run supply curve is flat. We did this when we did long-run supply, this exact scenario, and I think I actually even called it cab. So just to be sure we all get this right, at $2, the first cab starts operating. Then if you want more cab rides, either you could pay cabby one more, or the second cab enters. So here, that's 2Q1, 3Q1, 4Q1, 5Q1. Yes, Max, I get it. 7Q1, 8Q1, 9Q1. Okay? So what's the equilibrium number of cab operating in this market? I'm going to draw a demand curve. I'm going to draw it nice and linear. Okay, this is demand. So market equilibrium of this market left alone without cab medallions where taxis can just enter and exit freely. They have identical technology and constant cost. Equilibrium number of cabs in this market, the way I've drawn it, 9 cabs charging 2 each. Right? That's the unregulated, leave this market alone, perfectly competitive equilibrium with this nice flat long-run supply curve. Okay. Now, how about Josh? Josh runs for mayor of Berkeley and wins. All right. That's a good thing. An economist is mayor. I like it. And he says, wow, 9 cabs, that's crazy. That is way too many cabs. All this